Nobody's in yet.
I'll give it a second.
Did you post the giveaway thing on YouTube?
Yeah.
Community. Yeah, so people know about it. Oh, interesting. Hello. You must be from the Instagram because we're going to be having a Q&A today, so I just wanted to take this opportunity to... Oh, and Moshe, I know you. The man who always asks me questions. Really good ones too, the very controversial types. Well, anyways, we're going to wait for this to fill up, and when we do, I really wanted to use this as an advantage, to take advantage of getting to know you guys. I mean, it's absolutely insane that I have 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. I don't even know why. I don't even know what you guys like, really. But I'd love to get to know more about some of the questions that you have, even the videos suggestions that you guys have, or would like to even see. This is like a perfect time for me to just dive more into that. So this is a hello to all of you guys. And by the way, don't be afraid to go ahead, write up a question even. And I'd love to go ahead and get into it. And if not, I have a whole list of things that I wanted to talk about. So it's a win-win. Can't find a way to shut me up. I have to find a way to work on that. Your realness. Yeah, easier said than done. I'm recognizing that that comes with a cost. So right before this, I actually had my men's lecture. So I have groups for men and groups for women. For everybody who doesn't know what I do. I love the stuff that you guys are sending in here. It's actually really funny. This is my first live, so like I'm total amateur at this. Well, we were really talking about being real, but there's no question about what being real really entails is a deeper commitment to your life and why it's important to give yourself a try. So this whole promo that I have and everything that I do in the community is really speaking to a deeper level of consciousness that allows people to understand what they're really trying to resolve is not something they want to fix. It's something they want to get closer to. And, well, that's true because most people create a life to where they have to reject everything about who they are in order to really live it. And so this is everything that we have here because the whole point of the giveaway is that what I'm going to be having, I'll be picking one of you guys at random. Well, not really at random. Somebody really belongs here. I'll be making sure you did the whole qualified for the giveaway. And the whole point of it is that we have somebody who really belongs in the community because this is something that I hold very dear to me because it's a very deep and intimate space, and it's a space that people get to heal and transform. And I've noticed that to not be a majority of people in this space's function to really look to help you guys get more connected. And I feel like that's at the basis of you no longer looking to other people, but maybe being connected to the very thing that put the idea in your mind. All right, so now we got some cool questions. I'm seeing a girl. Ooh, I gotta scroll up a little bit. She only seems to align when I set strong boundaries, and essentially when I'm about to break up with her, she aligns. All right, well, that's typically a sign of feeding a dysfunction. People do this a lot. It's like if you need to walk away in order for them to listen, keep walking. Really what they've said is that they don't respond to you when you speak to them kindly, when you're there for them, and when you're sacrificing what's valuable to you. So you have to just recognize that that's also part of manipulation, and people do it a lot. And it's when you're 1 foot out the door, they say all the right things that you want to hear. And then you find yourself, it's almost like you're like, wait, did I just make the wrong choice? It's like the most advanced form of gaslighting. It's a terrible experience, but it's very necessary. And if you find yourself having to be leaving in order for them to listen, just keep walking. Recognize that most people's dysfunctions mean that they have no ability to communicate unless you walk away, which means that they can only communicate with somebody who's leaving with them or leaving from them. How do I get over a recent breakup? Well, start with blocking her on everything, and then maybe you'll start realizing you haven't even tried. Thank you, Cameron. It's like relational calisthenics. Can't fake the progress. No, you can't fake the progress. In fact, actually, there's nothing more difficult than being real with yourself, because you're probably not as far ahead as you think, but you're also not as far behind as you think either. And I feel like that's where the most maturity is developed. That's where a person develops a lot of emotional openness, and they also start learning to do the most difficult thing they can in their life, which I believe is to love themselves for who they are today, not for what tomorrow can give them or whatever grandiose achievement that they have can allow them to feel that significance. So I appreciate that. We got David here. What's your perspective on things seems deeply thought through? Is there a point or moment in your life where your perspective shifted to what you are representing now? Absolutely. Wow. Oh my God, David, great question. Really, really great question. I mean, to be real with you, the more that I do this, the more I realize it's easier to convince other people that you're growing than to actually grow and progress as an individual, because growing is very disillusioning. There's a lot of loss. There's a lot of letting go. There's a lot of losing. And that's not contrary to what you're saying. I think that most people see that growth is this infinite process of receiving everything that everybody applauds you for. In fact, actually, no, I feel like it's a deeper connection to your life to where you no longer disassociate from it. It's the richest experience possible because it's an incorporation of the mystic into a world of just dry reason. And by the way, the reason is all rationale anyways. And yeah, there's been a tremendous amount of change in my life. And I think that's the incorporation of emotion, because it made me realize the dimension that exists outside of just what we tell ourselves we are. That there's something intrinsic with us that's aimed towards something that is so contrary to what our ego tells ourselves we want. And at the moment, I'm actually working through that. So this is all part of what I have in my community. Part of what I do in my work is I help people get much closer to themselves, because I believe that at the end of the day, when people start there, a lot of the questions they begin to ask become more directed to how they can become the best version of themselves. And you get somebody really coming from that place without like the delusional narcissistic sense, they tend to be such a light to the people around them. What do we have here? Clutter-gurist. Sounds like dismissive, avoidant behavior. That's a problem you can never fix. They're probably asking the dysfunction we spoke about earlier. Love these lives, do them more often. Yeah, I plan on it. What's the play between faith, free will, and destiny? I feel like that's a lot of what's happened lately is destiny, but it makes me wonder, wait, where's my free will? Well, okay, well, here's your free will. It's your ability to open the doors when they present themselves to you. Your free will is also on what you're willing to sacrifice. I often notice that majority of people think free will as these choices that they make, but those things there's a much deeper level as to what really makes a choice. And you really can't say that your choice is real if you only use it as a way to avoid everything about your life that's deeply uncomfortable. So that's not really a choice, because you always just choose whatever the latter is. You haven't even developed the level of consciousness to recognize what's right for you. So when it comes to something like destiny, which is something I've been interacting with, I mean, that sounds really goofy when I say it, but the sacrifices that we make are for what we internally want to come closer to, that are deeply significant to us. That's where the transformation really is. And then eventually things like, free will is taken away from you. I believe that there's a certain point where an individual needs to make a sacrifice of what's most important to them to get closer to what they are really seeking, and that's freedom. And I think at the core of freedom, there's free will. And and probably the way that you're mentioning it, I don't think that destiny would take away from free will in that regard. I feel like there's decisions that we need to make for ourselves that allow us to see the wonders and miracles that surround it. In a lot of ways, you would remove free will from an individual if you showed them that like bigger picture immediately. Now, there needs to be a conscious choice to be willing to get closer to that faith you want to develop. All right. Here's what we got. That was Jordan. What do you think of building emotional resilience to the hardships of life? I mean, that's the best thing you can ever do. I mean, honestly, that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm recognizing that and this is for everybody who's considering making a lot of these shifts, a fair warning, a lot of negative emotion when really doing this thing called growth. One of the things that I noticed that allowed me to be there for others is opening myself up to allowing myself to feel and experience sadness. I noticed that, emotional resilience is not the repression of emotions or the curving of them. It's the ability to experience them when nobody else will. And I often notice that that takes a certain amount of courage and faith in life and also gets you stronger with your value of truth. Getting more and more connected to that is less about how you're seen, but more about what you're experiencing. And then there's something interesting about an emotion is that it's a language that runs much deeper than just the emotion itself that allows you to get more connected to who you are. And by doing that, you can get other people more connected to themselves. And that's the greatest gift you can give anyone. And I feel that, we have this kind of stoic representation of what emotions have to offer. And it's just so unfortunate because really, if people got connected to their emotions, they would be there for people in ways that would allow them to feel useful. And so I've noticed that it's no longer something I fear or even sadness. It's something I've learned to experience, and perhaps maybe it changes the way people see me, but that's good for them. I'm the one that's experiencing something that's opening me up, and I do that every damn day. So David, you wanted to share some ideas. That's cool. I probably won't be able to get into that, but I wanted to just kind of stick more to you guys and see who really belongs here. How to truly let go of that feeling of never being good enough. I've been working around this for many years. Would love your input. Thanks for what you do. Appreciate you. Well, thank you, Ellie. I love this one because I'm interacting with that, There's this practice called detachment. It's just very difficult because it's pretty much a tango with your ego and all of your identifications of what makes you valuable. Like there's narratives about it, and I could even say, well, maybe it's my speaking ability, maybe it's my ability to coach, maybe it's my intellect, Be able to identify your attachments and then start recognizing how you fuel your value through those very things. Now, here's what ends up happening is actually you diminish those things to the capacity that they can be at. And also, you don't build off a fundamental truth of yourself. And it's a truth that I believe is very difficult to internalize. What makes somebody enough for love? And who do they need to be in order to experience it? I feel like those questions are going to be what really help you get closer, Allie. Especially because it's not something that you want to avoid. If you're somebody that interacts with insecurities and is willing to lean into them, then you're somebody who's willing to connect to the truth of who they are at the deepest level possible. And you could say, well, that's building off of being. And that could be the very source of what flows through everything else about your life. And it's no longer making your gifts or how you're perceived or even your business or whatever it is that you have attached your value to. You could start recognizing as to where that really comes from, and you could build a life based off of that, and everything else can be a reflection of it, opposed to the other way around. Your ego will like to create a way to quantify your feeling of being enough. That's what your ego does. It likes to create narratives, and it allows you to feed your dysfunctions too of how you can do that. Well, if I can get this number, then I could feel this way. Truly, life is very difficult to open up to the existential components of reality that allow you to go, that tends to be true now, but then why do I reject it? Well, that's something you can interact with today. So that's for you, Ellie. I like this one. This one's fun. When do you know if a girl likes you or just being friendly? I don't usually get questions like that, but I love it because it grounds me into some simplicity. I always used to struggle with that because I never used to trust my intuition. This is usually more reflective of where you're at, because if there's anything clear as day, it's when a girl likes you. and I noticed that, especially when I stopped hiding who I was. I noticed that it was very hard for me to tell if a girl liked me when I was too busy playing a performance of what I thought girls liked. But when I was really connected to who I am, I immediately know what that looked like. And it was interesting because I could see when they'd be performative, because usually I'd be the one who's performative, and then I'd have no idea if they like me or not, because I'm not sure if they like me or the performance. So I'm like almost confusing myself. It's kind of like a lie you get yourself caught into. So it's really an intuitive question. But hey, there's no better way than finding out. You can just go ahead and ask them out, and you'll get an answer to that question really quick. I remember this one girl that I because I was so busy playing this like fuckboy type at the time. I was like 19. And she was kind of like awkward, sensitive, and like really pent up and sexual. And that was me, like to the T. And I couldn't tell if she liked me. I was like, for a second, I'm like, is this girl gay? Because like I'm losing track here. And I remember there's this one point, she just came up to me. She's like, what's your deal? And I was like, what do you mean, what's my deal? She's like, dude, like, I'm super into you. And I'm like, what, really? Like, you're into me? Like, I've been missing this shit the whole time? Well, you pick up where you need to pick up. And I picked up the slack, I guess, from that point on. But it made me realize that I was deeply emotionally disconnected. And I feel that attraction is something that runs much deeper than people's superficial interpretation of it. So I would say that it's really a question of allowing yourself to feel what you feel is difficult when you don't believe that somebody else would feel the same way for you. So really it comes down to internal insecurities that make you ask the question at all. Have you read The King, Warrior, Magician, Lover? Curious about your thoughts on the attack on masculinity, femininity, and a family unit. What great questions. I know you as JS, but I've got to get familiar with what your real name is. Woo! Okay, I'm a little nervous. Give me a second here. I'm going through all of these questions like I have to go through all the questions. I want to get to the good ones and tell you guys more about the community. And I mean, I really love that question. Yeah, I think that a lot of this has to do with people's perception of what culture does to them is not really reflective of culture, but more reflective of human nature. And what we talk about an attack on masculinity is just that typically happens when people when people separate themselves from their darkness and they remove themselves from how valuable that is. And so they become very altruistic. So it becomes something that we partially feed in a lot of ways. And the attacks on masculinity are really just a question of people not standing by that very thing, because it's very difficult to stand by it. It's difficult, male nature is incredibly dark. I mean, human nature is incredibly dark. And what society speaks to is to shame that very thing, but to feel connected to it would set you free. So the attack on masculinity seems to be more than just one part. It also goes with women too. Is that in a lot of ways people talk about how it can deconstruct masculinity and then by default will just make women more masculine. Of course, then that has an effect on the family unit because you have less and less people focusing on the vulnerabilities of what it is to exist as a man and as a woman. And typically, that's how you get people more connected to either their masculinity or femininities. You get them to see the vulnerabilities of each and see if they're willing to experience that for themselves. Cameron, this is so real. The more psychology has gone pop, it's become another layer of people being disconnected from themselves, especially those who are spiritual. Do you perceive this happening? Dude, are you kidding me, Cameron? I cannot stand the pseudo-spiritual world. In fact, actually, I realize that people have found more ways of being narcissists than ever because you have more ways to validate egocentricity. And that's at the basis of a narcissist, is that they have very low awareness and very high levels of extroversion. And so they don't become somebody that's internally connected. And I notice that's somebody who's aware of their centricity, is they remove themselves from any centricity at all and don't imply that to themselves. And so everything they do becomes one big manifestation of self-obsession. And I've often noticed that the spiritual world, or even the modern personal development or even psychology, has become a way to avoid things about life that are incredibly challenging. And I think that psychology is there to get you closer to your vulnerabilities, because then that's an existential question of how you live your life. And so, I mean, have I been perceiving that happening? Yeah, I have PR meetings with some of these spiritual people and I just roll my eyes because the last thing I want to be is on a call with them. Because everything that they're doing is just a way to avoid all of these parts of themselves. And then eventually projections become part of the game. And yeah, I'm not having fun, neither are they. And also, yeah, I'm not the kind of person you want to be, dishonest with. Because I really don't like that. Adi, my sexual energy is sacred and connected to my femininity and healing. How can I share this without being misunderstood and attract men who respect this depth instead of assuming I want sex right away? I think you outed yourself there. This fits really well with Cameron's question. There's this pseudo-spirituality in the first thing that you mentioned there. And I know you from my free community, so don't think you're off the hook here. This is not an assumption. You've given me plenty of information to work with. What's wrong with wanting sex right away? That's what I'll leave you with. I'll leave you with that kind of question. Because then maybe you'll start recognizing that there's nothing wrong with having somebody to want to have sex right away. There's nothing superficial about that either. Yeah, running away to spiritual ideology is not going to help you. Trying to make it something that it's not is only going to remove you from the instincts that allow love to flourish. And that seems to be what's happening. Jennifer Day, I'm curious about the following. What the scripture says versus what psychology recommends when relating to men. Hmm. What do we got? You know, it's interesting. The theological conversation seems to relate a lot to human nature, but if you remove human nature from the meta truth, what ends up happening is the religious conversation becomes incredibly circular, that becomes disconnected from its purpose. And so you almost have to integrate the humanity component with the theological truth and the stories that actually make the practice meaningful. So you almost need to make sure that the stories are aligned with the practice and the practice can be connected back to the story. And so that's really actually how you help men integrate or help anybody integrate, is that you have to connect it to a much larger truth. And the practice may be arbitrary, but if it allows the person to open up deeper, well, then that's the very thing that allows them to expand and grow, especially as a man. Wouldn't free will, faith, and destiny be all connected by consciousness? Yes, but that's way too big of a question to get into. How do we get over the fear of being seen? Well, it's a beautiful question, Claudia. I'm gonna try this whole thing called breathing because I have not been doing that. I don't know if you could see that in the back. It says the fear of being seen. So that's for you, Claudia. It's been something I've been working with. The fear of being seen typically starts with an awareness of, there's two parts. The fear of being seen is really a developmental story. And it looks a little bit like this. I am begging the blind, and that could be your parents or other the people you grew up with, to see me. Like as if you've ever been seen, as if you know how. So there's a certain point where, yeah, you become that child that begs the blind to see them, acting like you know how to be seen, telling yourself that's what you really want, when you don't even know what that's really like. So I think the first step to addressing any fear is realizing that's maybe warranted. You don't know what it's like to be seen. And then you have to start going a little bit deeper. Well, if I've been begging the blind to be seen my whole life, maybe I'm going to the blind begging them to see me. Maybe that story is changing. Maybe I don't want to be seen. And so I feel like that's usually what it starts with, which is a lot of people have a fear of being seen. Maybe start listening to what the fear is really trying to tell you. You gain a lot of information from that, and you no longer need to become this mystery to yourself. So the fear of being seen is pretty simple. I think I don't even have a relation. There's so much I hide from me. What makes me think I could put that under the lights of others? And then you start recognizing that you go to the blind conveniently because you secretly don't want to be seen. You never know how. So really you have to kind of start with that feeling of, maybe I don't know what that looks like, and I should open that up. And, it's also what we do here in the community. And so I want to be able to, let you guys know a little bit more about these questions you're asking are wonderful. Honestly, I'm really enjoying this. This is so awesome. I get to share this with all of you. I mean it, like really just... This is not just a live that I'm hosting at the moment. I'm getting to meet all of the people here that support me, and I think even more importantly, want to be a part of this as much as I want to put it into the world. So thank you all so much. Really, thank you so much. I'm going to read Talin's question here. In a day and age where people hold such high expectations from themselves and others, how does one address the desire to build working relationships when they go on first dates? Yeah, that typically requires start being real. You got to let the death of the hero happen. That's the metaphorical presentation of what that is. In other words, you got to start seeing how your culture has affected you, how your development has affected you, what your foundation really looks like and what that means about you. Because if you want to talk about building a relationship, you should build it on truth first. And then what really quantifies a relationship that you can continue to grow is two people who are willing to expand upon that truth and what that means for themselves as individuals. So there are two people who are making a commitment with living with that truth their whole life and allowing that to expand them as individuals too. So you're not really looking for somebody that you can throw the Hail Mary with and deliver on life. You're looking at somebody who's willing to sacrifice for what's most important to them. And I believe that commitment needs to be to becoming the best version of themselves. And their life has to be reflective of it. So you also could say the same thing yourself, which is we've created these high expectations because they're a way to avoid everything about perhaps maybe how desolate we are, how dark we are, everything we don't like about ourselves. And if you made that the basis and you integrated that, then you would look to a relationship that fulfills you, number one, and meets your needs. And I noticed that a lot of the time people put a fulfillment without meeting their needs, like as if that's even possible. Again, another thing that we have in the community, I love doing these lives. I want to start doing them more, but most importantly, I want to talk about how everything that you're asking here is what I would love to dive deeper into, because that's for people that really want to get to know more about this, not just let this be a question, but to strengthen their commitment with what's most important to them in their life. Jorge Rodriguez, I feel like my dark sexual nature makes me unlovable. Almost like what I am is meant to push loved ones away. How can I be with one woman without feeling like I repress a part of myself? Well, I think this is beautiful, because this is really the dialogue of somebody who's experiencing a shame for that part of themselves. I think what's difficult for you is not that you believe that this part will push them away. In fact, actually, it will do the contrary. It's the very thing. I don't think you believe that it's the very thing that could allow you to have that loving, fulfilling relationship. So shame kind of functions in a way that makes you hide this part of you. Because that's a very difficult thing to do. Well, there's a lot of power, there's a lot of capacity behind that. And any kind of dark sexual nature needs to be integrated into an ideal. But maybe you have a belief that doesn't make you think that you could integrate that into a loving family, a loving relationship. Maybe that also has to do with a lot of developmental experiences that you've seen, maybe with your father or your mother. You've seen dark sexual nature play out. You've seen how it destroys families. You know its capacity, and you know how destructive it is. And so really we often think of the dark side as something we need to avoid. Like anybody who's watched the Star Wars films knows that it's something you need to know. And there's an expression, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And there's a reason why that's true. It's true because you got to get so damn familiar with that part of yourself inside of you, like as if you're not that. And so if you ever want to go ahead and change a story, I believe it's that you come closer to the very thing that you've told yourself you need to avoid. And shame does exactly that. It gets you to avoid that. And then you go, well, how can I spend more time with that nature? Well, the best thing that you could possibly do, especially if you want to get closer to this part of yourself, start representing it outside of the narrative that your shame has around it. So you have to kind of clear a lot of the emotions that you have from your past experiences and what that means to you. Now, after that happens, you'll start having a neutral relationship with it. And then at that point, you could accept it. What are your thoughts on following your soul rather than following logic when it comes to relationships? Well, that's one big rationale. I think at the end of the day, you are following your soul, whether you like it or not. Deeply emotional beings, that's what we are as human beings, deeply, deeply emotional. So I really wouldn't expect anything so unemotional about the decisions that you make when it comes to relationships. We often talk about it like it's our logic, but that's one big rationale. I think it's the idea of understanding about what our soul wants. And then there's something about your mind being able to work in tandem with that. It's no longer something you need to reject. I think it's something that you need to go deeper with. So I wouldn't say it's one versus the other. I would say it's the integration of both. What ends up happening is that you no longer dismiss the experiences of your life, and you actually give yourself an opportunity to come close to the truth of it outside of the past experiences. So your mind is not something you want to erase at all. In fact, actually, you want it to be the very thing that you can see from start to finish. And then when you see it from start to finish, you could start recognizing that there's more to your experience, there's more to life, there's more to attraction. And then you're no longer coping, you're actually accepting everything that the reality has showed you. Maybe perhaps an odds that are an unbeatable odds. And it's an unbeatable odds, but you connect to a part of yourself that's against all odds. And so I feel like that's probably a lot better place to start your relationships from. Whew. Which represents a more authentic experience rather than building a tower that will eventually crumble? Not sure I have the full question there. Rita Lee. Men win by keep pursuing. Don't sit and think too long. No, sit and reflect. You'll realize you don't have to chase. Let's see what we got. Mrs. Proxy. I think I'm saying it right. How can I stay sane while trying to heal from my past, present, and future? I don't know how you're trying to heal from your future, but I do understand when it comes to past and present. As I work through the pain of the past, I end up creating new wounds in the present and superficial ones in the future. Well, I think that's a catastrophization that you're interacting with. I think the best place to start is a little bit more with the pain of your past and how that's relevant to your present. You're looking at it as something that's creating problems. No, it's revealing of your life. And you could say, well, then what am I resisting so much about this? Why is it I tell myself I need to be this thing that I'm not? And I feel that what you're describing to me is resistance more than like resistance. It's creating a lot of unnecessary suffering. And you could say, well, look, I'm interacting with pains of my past. But anybody who knows anything about wounds is they show up in your present. So going back is moving your life forward. And so I feel that it's important for you to see what you're resisting about it, because you might have another commitment that's contrary or a value in conflict. You might tell yourself you want healing more than you do, because all healing is revealing of what's inside, especially if you have a wound. You could look inside them, and typically when you look inside, it's not what you thought it was it? So I wouldn't resist it. I feel like there's a lot of resistance that's happening there, and that's going to make, a lot of the superficial problems you talk about in the future. All right. Klettergerist. I love that name. Not saying it right. Probably not. It sounds like a German name. Emotional resilience. To you would mean to feel everything that is necessary and to deal with it. Put it plainly, I wouldn't say to deal with it. I'd say to experience it. It's one thing to deal with fear, and that's called coping. It's another thing to deal with sadness. It's another thing to experience it, because if you're experiencing it, you're experiencing something much more than just the emotion. You're experiencing what the emotion is communicating about you, about reality, and it's kind of altering of how you see everything. And so if you have a really developed ego, you'll hate the whole process of that, because you'll start experiencing things you don't like experiencing. And maybe that'll be powerlessness or hopelessness or despair or perhaps associations to weakness. But it's so funny, that's exactly what your ego would say when this is the process of you developing strength. It's almost like the one thing we can't stand is the process of being. Being is eternal becoming, and that takes faith. I agree with the deep, raw, unfiltered feeling. It's what connects you to yourself. All right. I like this one because it's loaded. You claimed being a good communicator. Might be narcissistic. Do you consider yourself then a good communicator based on those parameters? And if so, in which aspects of your life specifically? Well, I don't ever hide my dark nature. I'm very, very familiar with my narcissistic characteristics. Absolutely. And I feel that, being a really good communicator makes you deeply Machiavellian. So meaning that your ability to manipulate people is going to be extraordinarily high. Now, that ability to manipulate typically comes from another part of you that deeply seeks a lot of attention. So there we go, the narcissistic characteristics. It's not something to shame. I believe it's a part of you should become really, really familiar with, because you could do a lot of good with it. There's a tremendous amount of capacity in that. The problem is that most people don't aim themselves towards good, and they become the back-end representation of those characteristics, and that's what you call a narcissist, somebody who's eliminated all awareness from any kind of progress or development of themselves, in the name of themselves. So it's like they're like eternally fucked. All right, I'm gonna have to go through these a little bit quicker because we're gonna be wrapping up in the next 2 minutes here, and I can't wait to see you guys there. We're gonna be reaching out to one of you guys because I'm here with my media manager, so he has pretty much everybody here who's commented or left a message, and we want to make sure that you've followed through all of the parameters that make you qualified. But I think even most importantly, I just really want to find somebody who really belongs in the community, because everybody that's in there is really growing. When I started this community, I didn't think that it would have the effect that it did. I had a lot of limiting beliefs around the kind of good that I can do if I put myself out there more, but that was always something I struggled with, because I can't really control that. Who's to say that my efforts won't be recognized, or I won't get what I need in order to continue? And I feel like that's the vulnerability of this experience. Is I really connect to why I do this and how important it is to me, and really truthfully why I do it for me. And there's something about that. There's a spark in my soul, and it's a dance that I'm more curious about than perhaps maybe what it can give me. It's more of what I can give it. And I accept the vulnerabilities that come with it, but I was really talking about my community when I first opened it. It was very interesting because I didn't believe that it would have such an impact that it did. For me, in a lot of ways, I knew it was another way to just open up an avenue to help people. And I noticed what really set it apart is that not only would people watch the material, I'd be there with these lives to help them integrate it. And when I saw how much that helped people, it made me realize that I think just a lot of people want to know that someone is there along with them in the most difficult processes of life. And I think the most difficult process of life is change itself, because it's so contrary to everything that you've signed up for. And to be exposed to that much of it and to not have somebody hold your hand, it made me feel what it was like when I started this myself. Really, I built this because I knew for certain that it took everything that I had in order to take one step for me. What I looked to build in the world before I built any of this, and for any of you guys know this about how I started my career, my work, is, has anybody ever seen Stupid Crazy Love? It's a story. Ryan Gosling takes a guy out, completely transforms him. You know, he was crippled in his relationships, and that's what I used to do. I lived in LA. People would fly out, and I would take them on these experiences. But these experiences became much more reflective of the internal struggles of the person. And so we would interact and integrate both of them into the world. And so they would have an adventure that they would experience internally and externally. There was the reason why I started doing this is because I realized, you know, in my life, I wanted to have that hand extended to me. I never really saw it. I always felt that it was kept at a distance. Transformation always terrified me. Taking action always terrified me. Facing all of these parts of myself always terrified me, but then yet here I am. You know, I'm probably the most afraid person that you've ever met. Somebody who's most afraid of the things that I'm inviting you to do. And I would say the only thing that set me apart is realizing what was happening to my life every day, I avoided it. I got to see what was happening to me and who I was becoming. And I did not believe that that was an accurate representation of who I could be. And so I started. And sometimes it usually just starts with somebody, you know, putting their hand out, being open to that kind of help, because I know that I've seen what it's done for people, and I know what it's done for me. And I created this because it's an invitation to everybody to get that opportunity. This is not just my private work. My private work is incredibly expensive. This is an opportunity for you to get access to that alongside me, and I'll be walking you guys through every step of it. That's the reason why we have those bi-weekly Q&As, and everything that you guys are seeing in the lectures that I have are actually being currently updated. So you get to have, you know, more of the internal details of what's going on in my life. But also I believe a change that's happening for everyone. And it's a question of if we're on the wave or not. So the question is, are you? And so for everybody else who wants to get more information to this, I would love to go ahead and just say, you could DM me on Instagram. You could DM me the word promo, easy word, hard to forget. You could also leave it on one of the most recent captions for the giveaway post that we have in our community. That would be the best if you're from YouTube. And then we can go ahead and personally send you guys the link or respond to that there. God bless you all. Really, really, really going to be picking, just so grateful for this, you know, that you guys show up and that you even listen, you know. Sometimes I just think I'm taking way too much acid. And I'm like, oh. Besides that, go ahead, comment the word promo on the recent community post that we had on it, and we're going to go ahead and I'll let you know which one of you guys got the giveaway. God bless you all, and I'll see you guys in the next one. It's going to be on Instagram, and I'm looking forward then. All right. All the best.